Welcome back, pilots of the virtual skies. We are no longer at Portland International Airport with our 737-900. You may remember our last two flights. We took a quick flight to Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. Today I've decided to change airplanes to this beautiful Boeing 747-800, the most modern of the 747s. This aircraft just rolled off of the factory here in Everett, Washington. We are at Payne Field in Snohomish County. It's a government-run airfield, but the number one tenant, of course, is Boeing. Look at those beautiful chrome engines in the morning sunlight. And I thought maybe we'll take a plane directly from it's gone through the assembly process, it's gone through its test flights, and now it's ready to be delivered down in Los Angeles, California. So a 2-hour and 18-minute flight, no passengers aboard. Maybe we'll take some cargo, some extra parts. This is not default scenery here at Payne Field. This comes from a scenery package called Boeing Country. It includes the Boeing Field up in Seattle, where B-17 bombers were built in World War II. It's a test facility. It also includes SeaTac Airport and, strangely enough, the Bremerton Airport. Bremerton is the home of the U.S. Navy shipyard. It's got submarines parked as a submarine base, as well as a dry dock and refurbishing of Navy ships. But they model that airplane as well. Take a look just ahead of us on the right-hand side, that big building. It's actually called the Paint Shack. It's far from a shack at all, but that's where all the finished jets get their first paint job. This is the home of the Boeing 6-7 wide body, the 7-7, the 787 Dreamliner, and of course the Boeing 747 Jumbo Jet. The building on the left-hand side is called the Hush House. This is where planes can be brought up to full throttle, and it's friendly on the neighbors. And then that monstrous building in the background. Let's see if we can... I'm going to see if I can get over to that building, because it's quite something to look at. Go over my camera views and put my camera on really fast. And see if we can just zoom over to that assembly building. Big murals on the walls. And when these doors are closed, they're quite wonderful. This building, let's get a little bit over there. This building is the largest building in the world in terms of interior volume. What that means is, if you were to fill this building up with water, it would hold more water than any other building on the planet. Just a massive facility. You can see the doors are open, you can see some jumbo jets. 78,000 people work 3 shifts, 5 days a week. There's no air conditioning or heating in this building. Basically, during the summertime, they leave the doors open, let the breezes blow through. During the wintertime, they close those doors. The electronic equipment and the body heat of the workers keeps the building nice and toasty warm. So if you want to come up here on your own, about 40 miles north of Seattle, it's a free tour that is offered out here. You can walk on a balcony overlooking the assembly process. You know, they don't allow cameras or any handheld items when you're on the tour. The reason they say is they want to prevent industrial espionage. But I don't think that's the real reason. The reason is you're on a balcony, you're overlooking the assembly of these airplanes, and there is a possibility that if you have something in your hand, it could slip and fall, damaging one of these very expensive airplanes. Boeing, of course, has a very strict policy. You break it, you buy it. Wow. Anyway, here are some other new 777s just off the line. Some of them are in the green color. They haven't been painted. I'm coming over here to the very corner. There's a 787 Dreamliner. Take a look at these two 747s. Specifically, this Cargo Lux variety. This is an F model. It's a freighter, and it's got its nose door open. And let's take a look lounging around. We got a couple of workers in there. See if we can look at them. Got the back cargo door open, the nose door open. One of the workers is wearing a yellow shirt. The other one's got some blue coveralls on, but you can see them lounging there, and gives you an idea of the size of that 747. Okay, back to the delivery center. The delivery center is the only building on the airport that has jetways. So we are cold and dark. So we're going to do our flight planning. Now the flight time is 2 hours and 18 minutes to Los Angeles. What I thought I'd do is make 2 videos. Make a first one, get us started, get us take off and in the cruise. And then I'll figure out a way to pause it and then come back after the cruise for the descent. Or more likely, I'll just go ahead and make 2 videos. So here we are, and let's hop on board. First thing I want to do is go to what's called the EFB, the electronic flight bag, to the ground services screen, and we'll open up the cabin door. Let our pilot not flying head downstairs. Even though we don't have passengers, we still have a cabin crew, I'm sure, so we'll let them come aboard. And pop up to the overhead. Now this is what I call the flying overhead. This is the overhead that I would use during flight. It's not the most convenient for looking at all the switches. This is a very complex overhead. So here on our immediate left, we can see that we do have ground power available. I'm going to push that button, turn on the ground power. Just above the battery switch, I'm going to flip open this little plastic guard and turn on the battery. Okay, and notice just above the guard, this utility left and utility right, that turns on the cabin power, the coffee maker, the overhead lights. We want to make sure the emergency exit lights are on. Those are both in the on position. Then down here at the bottom, there's a switch for the beacon. I want to flip that beacon switch into its down or on position. You know, one of the big differences between Airbus and Boeing is, in a Boeing, down means on, and up or toward you means off. And Airbus's, the switches work exactly opposite. So if you ever transition from a Boeing to an Airbus, sometimes it can be a little difficult. Okay, this is a more square-on view of the overhead, and I like to use this one when I'm on the ground. Helps me get my switchology correct. So we're on ground power. We turn on the battery switch, we have our utilities on, we have our beacon on, we can turn on our hydraulic power in the lower left corner. Let's flip each of these to auto. Auto, 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 and auto. That gets our hydraulics going. We can go down to our electronic flight bag and open up the forward cargo door and open up the aft cargo door. Let's go outside and watch those. There they are, powering their way open. On a 737, you might be inclined to load the luggage individual suitcases. You wouldn't do that on the 747. This aircraft, you can see a couple of conveyor power carts down by this couple of workers down here. You wouldn't do that on a 747. You'd use this piece of equipment here on the left. This is called a pallet loader, and the pre-positioned pallets would roll into the individual cargo bays. Okay, let's hop back aboard. We will go back upstairs and get our IRSs aligned. Again, one of the longest processes. So up in upper left-hand side, align nav, align nav, align nav. Okay, let's go back to our electronic flight bag and let's get some payload loaded. I mentioned we want to carry maybe some Boeing parts. So let's take about 25% of our available load. And this is in kilograms. I don't like kilograms, so I'm going to go to the options page and switch that over to pounds. And then we can go to payload. 25%, that is 3,100 pounds. And push the load button. And we are now loading the aircraft with those parts. Okay, fuel. I've done a pre-planned fuel on Simbrief, that free flight planning program. And for our 2-hour and 18-minute flight, we're going to need block fuel, 72,365 pounds of fuel. How would you like to buy that much fuel? Not me. Anyway, so that's just rounding off to 73,000. 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 73,000. We'll get the start fueling button, and we are fueling. Let's go to our flight management computer. There on the EFA screen here on our left, you can watch that fuel happening. Before we go into our flight planning, let's get those flaps down, because we want those flaps to be extended to takeoff position for our first officer. 10 degrees of flaps is the takeoff position. So, FMC, position initialization. On the 37, we had to go to the next page. The 747 has a little more advanced software, so the GPS information is here on the same page. All we have to do is click it, see it in the scratch pad, and insert it right there where it goes. Our reference airport today is KPAE. Our route is KPAE. Even though the aircraft has updated avionics, unfortunately the soft airplane is rather old, European software, and it comes with its own little glitches. You already saw one in the default weight being in kilograms rather than pounds, but there are others. So KLAX is our destination. For instance, I don't have a way of loading in a company route like I did last time. I'm going to have to activate, execute. I'm going to have to go to the next page and enter our waypoints by hand. Our first one is SEA down to Seattle. Oops. SEA needs to go in the right-hand side, direct to SEA. Then we're going to be on J5. J5 is a high-altitude, fast-moving jetway. It's analogous to the interstate system. All the big planes that move fast travel on the jetways. And then below that, analogous to the U.S. highway system, is a set of what are called Victor Airways. And Victor Airways are for lower traffic, it's for slower traffic. And sometimes, now the big guys do use Victor Airways when climbing and descending. But J5, it's not modeled in this software, so I'm not going to enter it. But that's our route. And our next waypoint is SUMMA, S-U-M-M-A. That's down in Oregon. Next to Jinmo, J-I-N-M-O, which is in Northern California. Then we would be on a Victor Airway, Victor number 7. That's not modeled. So our next waypoint is Jaguar, J-A-G-W-A. And finally, just north of Southern California is Burgle. Maybe that means there are a lot of burglaries that happen down there. I don't know. Sometimes the 5-character name of a waypoint has something to do with where you are. I know when you're in Seattle, one of the waypoints is Mariner, and another one is Seahawk, and another one is Griffey, and another one is all sorts of names that are reference to the local area. Okay, let's go to our legs page, or to a departure and approach. We don't know our runways yet, and I don't believe Payne Field has any SIDs or published instrument departure procedures. I'm betting we're probably going to get either runway 6 right or 34 left. I know that because 16 right or 34 left. 16 left and 34 right is a very small runway used by general aviation airplanes. So it'll be 16 right or 34 left, but we don't know yet. So let's go to our performance. In North America, you would fill in the 0 fuel weight first, and then you would add that to the cargo, the fuel, and then you would take the number of passengers, and depending on whether the passengers are male or female, you would assign them a standardized weight, and then that weight would be calculated, And all that weight together, plus your zero fuel weight, here in the upper left corner would be your gross weight or your takeoff weight. Well, this European program, it actually wants us to do things a little backwards. It wants us to put in our calculated takeoff weight, and then it will calculate backwards to get a zero fuel weight. So our takeoff weight is 646,265 pounds. So I'm going to put 646.2 into the gross weight, and it's calculated. The zero fuel weight is 573. We have calculated 574, so that's really close. 05 on the reserves. Cruise altitude 390 feet. You can see the computer says that the most economical cruise is 378, but the flight planning software assigned us 390, so we'll put that in. Cost index of 85. We are going to have a D-rated takeoff, but a normal performance climb. Flaps 10. This airplane, you do not have to manually spin in the trim level. It's done automatically, but you can see the trim is set for 7.3. And if you look up here on the EFA screen, you can see they've got 7.5, and you can see the green falls right into the arrow falls right into the green area. So we're doing really well. Let's verify our V-speeds, 140, 153, and 165. Remember that 165 V2 is so important, and we're going to add it up in here into our MCP panel for rejected takeoff. Let's file our flight plan. Oh, I mentioned earlier, I want to keep the takeoff performance on one screen, in this case the pilot not flying, and then on the other FMC screen I want to put up my legs. Go to the legs page. Here we go. Seattle, Suma, Jinmo, Jaguar, and Burgle. Flight plan. Boeing flight number 43, leaving Payne Field for LAX. Transition altitude of 12,000 feet. Requested cruise 390, flight level 390. Performance on the descent 1,500 feet per minute. In a real flight plan, you would put your waypoints here. I know from experience that if I do that, I take a chance of crashing this program. So I'm not going to do that here. You remember we did do that on the 737. But this program is much more sensitive, and it's more apt to crash. So we're going to enter it just like that. And let's listen to our ATIS, or Automated Terminal Information System. This is recorded information of a routine nature. Well, while I'm down here, I'm going to turn my seatbelt sign on, lower left corner. We don't have passengers aboard, but best to have the seatbelt sign on. I'm also going to turn on the transponder panel, just middle side of the right-hand side. I'm going to spin this to the TA position, 2 notches over. Remember, that's the ground position where the ground controller can see where you are, but it doesn't transmit harmful radio frequencies. The next setting over, TARA, will turn this dial over to that just when we're away from the gate. So here, just below the number 1 comm radio on the upper left side, I'm going to push the speaker to the on position, and I'm going to use the flip-flop button on the left-hand side, and we'll listen to the ATIS.
Snohomish Co. Information November. 1300 Zulu weather. Wind light and variable. Visibility more than 10. Sky conditions 10,000 broken. Temperature 15. Dew point -5. Altimeter 2989. Arriving runways 16 left, 16 right. Departing runways 16 left, 16 right. Advise on initial contact you have November.
Okay, Time to get our clearance. We know we're going to be on 16 right.
Snohomish Co. Delivery. Good morning. Boeing 43 Heavy request IFR clearance to Los Angeles is filed. Boeing 43 Heavy, cleared to Los Angeles by runway 16 right departure. Initial altitude 11,000 feet. Squawk 2063. Cleared to Kilo Lima Alpha X-ray by runway 16 right departure. Initial altitude 11,000 feet. Squawk 2063, Boeing 43 Heavy. Boeing 43 Heavy, read back correct. Contact ground on 121.800 when ready for startup.
Let's plan our pushback. Okay, we're going to be taking runway 16 right, which means we're going to be departing to the south. So we want a pushback, tail to the right, nose to the left, so our airplane will be pointed toward the north. And you can see this green outline is exactly what we'll want, so we'll push that.
Ground cockpit, plan acknowledged. Call me through the menu when we're ready.
Let's get off of external power and go on to our APU for pushback. Remember, not only does that provide electrical power but while we're being pushed back, but it will also provide high pressure air or puffer power for our engine start. So here on the middle left hand side, I'm going to twist this dial to the APU start position. I'm going to turn on all these fuel pumps in the middle. Look at these massive number of fuel pumps for this big old jet. And the APU is so far back in the back, we're not going to be able to hear it. The only way we're going to know that it's ready is that these two lights that say APU Gen 1 and APU Gen 2, you're going to see the small word available come up along the outer edge. And then we can transfer on to APU and off. There they go, available. Transfer on to APU and off of external power. And unlike the 37, we do not have to transfer on the bus. The airplane automatically knows that we went to a new source of power. And you can see that external power is available, but we're now on the APU. I am going to go to the lower right corner and hit this APU engine bleed. Notice that the air conditioning packs, just 1, 2, and 3, they are off. This 37 and the 47 must have the packs off to start the engines. The 77 and 87, you can leave the air conditioning on. Here we can monitor our cargo temp, flight deck temp, and passenger temp. They're in the auto position. And just above this is the cabin altitude pressure. We don't have to dial any altitudes like we did on the 37. All you want to make sure that these buttons are not in the manual position, but they're set to automatic. Our yaw damper is on, and we are ready to ask the controllers for pushback.
Snohomish Co. ground, Boeing 43 Heavy, request startup and pushback. Boeing 43 Heavy, startup and pushback approved.
We closed our doors.
Startup and pushback approved. Boeing 43 Heavy.
Oh, stay down here. Let's get the tug on the way.
Ground cockpit, tow is driving up.
Here's one thing that I thought it would be kind of cool to watch. This is really cool. The tug is going to position itself, straddle the forward landing gear. It's going to cradle the forward landing gear. And then a couple of flaps are going to give the forward landing gear a big old hug. And then the tug is going to lift the forward landing gear and the rest of the airplane off the ground. I thought this might be kind of cool to watch.
Okay, all doors and hatches are closed, ready to connect.
And once the landing gear is raised during pushback, the steer tire does not have to steer at all. All the steering is done by the tug. There it goes, up and off the ground. I think that's pretty cool.
So connected and flight path inserted. Release parking brake. Starting pushback and you may start engines.
There you can see the glass jetway starting to pull away from the aircraft. How cool is that? First thing I want to do is to go to number 4 engine and pull out this start switch. Then down to the throttle pedestal. This is called an engine cutoff switch, but it also supplies fuel. So I'm going to flip that up and I'm going to monitor the EGT or exhaust gas temperature reading here in the EFIS panel. I'm also going to monitor the N1 level. And once we have that number 4 engine giving us the performance we want, we'll move over to number 1. All these yellow indications need to be gone before it's time for us to push back from the gate and head on out. And most of them have to do with the engines not running. Okay, time to move up to number 1. Start switch out. Engine cutoff to run. Monitor number 1. Number 4 is stabilizing nicely. We can go to number 2. Number 2 is doing nicely. Up to number 3. Each one of the 4 747 engines is the exact same engine that's used on the Boeing 737. If you ever get a chance to see a Boeing 777, it's really easy to identify by its triple set of tires, but the diameter of the engine cowling of a 777 is roughly the same size as the diameter of the fuselage of a 737. That's an amazingly large engine.
Operation complete. Set parking brake. Disconnecting tow. Stand by.
We can turn the air conditioning packs on. We can turn off the APU. Thank you, APU, for your wonderful service. We can turn on here in the lower right corner the logo light, the wing light. We'll leave the strobe lights until we're ready for takeoff. The nav light. We're going to hold off on the taxi light and the left and right runway turnoff lights until that tug has gotten out from underneath us. Not so critical here during the daytime, but especially at night. You don't want to blind that poor tug driver. And sometimes you fail to realize how high up in altitude we sit here in this elevated
So is disconnected and bypassed and has emerged. And signal will be on the right. We'll see you next time and have a great flight.
So you don't really know what's going on underneath the airplane other than the indications that you have and by physically watching that toe come out from underneath. There he goes. So, taxi light on. Runway turn off right. Runway turn off left. And let's ask for clearance to taxi.
Snohomish Co. Ground. Good morning. Boeing 43 Heavy is ready for taxi. Boeing 43 Heavy, taxi to runway 16 right. Contact tower on 132.950 when on holding point. Taxi to runway 16 right. Contact tower on 132.950 when on holding point. Boeing 43 Heavy.
The 737 is a much easier plane to taxi. Not only do you only have 2 throttle levels instead of the 4 that I'm dealing with, having 4 throttle levels is kind of like being an old Roman chariot driver. Look at the engine performance down there in the lower right corner. Each of those engines is working at a slightly different performance, and that's kind of like an old Roman chariot driver. Each of your horses has a slightly different performance, and you're trying to get them all running together. Another challenge, the 737, I steered with the rudder using a twist motion on the flight stick. Here I've got a separate throttle that is using what's called a ground tiller. And if you ever go on the flight deck, just behind the yoke, there's a little baby steering wheel. It's called a ground tiller, used for steering, and it's extremely sensitive. So here we go on a left-hand turn. I mentioned on an earlier video, if you see any concrete behind the runway, it's often called a displaced threshold. You can use that area for taxi and for takeoff. Here on the right-hand side, that's how you would get to the displaced threshold, but you can't land on that area. We're not going to use it today because I noticed on one of my earlier flights that the ground controller doesn't recognize you unless you pull up near the runway. So I'm going to stay in, but you know, if it were me flying, I would stay to the right and use every little bit of pavement I can use, and I would be on that displaced threshold.
Boeing 43 Heavy, contact tower on 132.950. Have a nice flight. Snohomish Co. Tower, good morning. Boeing 43 Heavy on holding point of runway 16 right, ready for departure. Boeing 43 Heavy, wind 2054 knots, runway 16 right, cleared for takeoff.
Christmas tree mode, strobes are on, landing lights are on. Rotate our TCAS into the TARA position. This airplane does not have continuous fire dials for the engines. Turn on our flight directors left and right. Turn on our auto throttle.
Cleared for takeoff runway 16 right, Boeing 43 Heavy.
I'm getting a caution and a configuration warning. You notice somehow our flaps somehow got down fully extended. We don't want that. We want 10 degrees of flaps, which is our takeoff configuration. Clear that caution light. Fuel override 2 and fuel override 3 are not on. Let's get that taken care of. Make sure those panels are clear. Yes, they are. Okay.
Approaching 16 right.
There's a Dream Lifter. You saw the Dreamliner 787. Look at that big guppy-looking airplane across the runway. That's the Dream Lifter, a modified 747 designed to split in two as it carries airplane parts.
On runway 16 right.
Kind of a flying guppy. Oh, hit the speed brake switch by accident. Get the speed brakes up. Get ourselves back on runway. And once we're on the runway, we'll hit the toga button. Takeoff, go around. And we're going to let the computer calculate our thrust to give us that D-rated takeoff. We're close to full thrust, but not quite.
80 knots. V1. Rotate. V2.
Gear up, positive brake. First notch of flaps can get gone.
Boeing 43 Heavy, altimeter 29.89er. Contact Seattle Center on 127.050. Bye. Altimeter 29.89er. Contact Seattle Center on 127.050. Goodbye, Boeing 43 Heavy. Seattle Center, good morning. Boeing 43 Heavy passing 1,700 feet, climbing 11,000 feet. Boeing 43 Heavy, turn left heading 341, climb to 11,000 feet. Turn left heading 341.